Well, John, I thought I would pick you up today and take you to lunch. My treat.
Dave, that was nice of you, but this Infiniti is running horrible, and your dash is lit up like a Christmas tree.
And that is precisely why I wanted to bring a master mechanic, because I don't think this thing's making it back.
It's not going to make it to lunch. Turn this thing around. Let's go back to Tech Garage, and you guys join us as we diagnose and repair this Infiniti. Welcome to Season 7 of Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com. Wow, Season 7, thanks to you guys. This is going to be the best season ever. We got Garage Ed, which is all about brakes, and we got a new segment called Master Technicians Tech Tips. You guys wanted it, you got it. And of course, we're all about the troubleshooting and diagnostics with the coolest demos on the planet. That's what Tech Garage is all about. Speaking of diagnostics, well, we got an Infiniti G35 in the shop, and it's got a misfire. We pulled it in, running rough, bucking, surging, not running good at all, even causing some backfiring. So, you know, it takes three things for an engine to run: spark, fuel, and compression. Got our handy dandy scan tool right here, went under there, plugged it in, and I got a P0300. That's a P0300. That's actually a misfire code on cylinder 3. Infiniti was kind enough to actually pinpoint the cylinder so we could find out what's going on. Easiest thing to check first, well, that's spark. So I'm going to come down here. I already took the intake plenum off right here. Once I took the intake plenum off, then all I got to do is go down here. There's two coolant lines right here. I disconnected those, and the coil for cylinder 3 is located right there. So I can sit here, pop the coil off, and what I'm going to do is once I get the coil off, I'm going to leave it plugged in if I can here, because I want to show you, do we have spark? That's the first thing we can check. That's the easiest thing to check. So I'm going to pull it up here. Got my handy dandy spark tester from RockAuto.com. Put it right here. And then what I can do is find a suitable ground and ground it. Get away from this joker. If it's working, it's going to throw some spark here. So we got our chief tech Josh in there. Josh, why don't you fire it up and let's see if we got some spark. Wow, we got good spark. All right, shut it off. Awesome. So we're pumping some spark out of there. That means it has to be fuel. Now, the fuel, you can take a look at this graphic right here. The fuel system in this car, well, it starts all the way back at the tank. The tank has the fuel pump built into it, pumps the fuel all the way up to the injector system, then it returns back to the car, goes back to the tank. There's a lot of fuel in between there and some tests we have to run, but really, it all starts at the fuel injectors. We got a problem with our fuel injectors.
Got a problem.
Yeah, we got a problem, and it's perfect timing. Just the guy we needed to see. This is Dave Dobson. He knows everything when it comes to cars. So Dave, I don't even see injectors, and we have an injector problem.
You got it? That means you and I are going to need to take the plenum cover off.
Not you and I. My hands don't get that dirty. We got a chief technician here. We assembled a whole team of tech, so this is going to be incredible. You know what? I'll get a cool demo set up. You guys get to the injectors.
Why don't you get out of here, and Josh and I will take care of this. All right, Josh, got a couple of bolts to take care of here. I'll switch out the socket.
I've never seen him run so fast.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? A little hard work shows up and John takes off. All right, we're ready to go. You want to do the hose clamps on that side?
Yes, sir. I'll do the hose clamps. What we need to do is just, on these bolts right here, go ahead and work from the inside out, okay?
Very good.
And I'll start working on this air plenum over here on this side, on my intake manifold on this side. One thing is, sometimes you don't have to take off the throttle body. And if you can avoid that, especially on these electronic throttle bodies, just leave it on there. Because if you take the throttle body off, you're going to have to replace that gasket. In our case, I can just slide off this hose off here. I've disconnected the hose here. And you may end up having to work with it a little bit. Like I have. I've taken one off before, but I've kind of forgotten some stuff. And so I'm going to take off what I know should take off, but we'll pull this thing up. And if something's connected, we'll still go ahead and take those off. Just be real easy with it.
Cool. And we were lucky enough to have a code checker. You may not have that, but you may notice that you have a big misfire. John is going to show us how to diagnose that and even find out what cylinder it is.
That's right, Dave. There's multiple ways to find a misfire. You can run a power balance test, you can get a scan tool and kill injectors, but true Tech Garage fashion, we are using a thermal imager. I created a misfire in this engine and ran it. Check this out, man. See the header? It's glowing red hot. You got fire. See the one next to it and that one? Well, that's the cylinder with the misfire. It's cold. Nothing's burning. Nothing's happening. So you can use a thermal imager, you can use paper clips, you can do what you need to do, but isolate that cylinder. Well, we know what cylinder ours is, so when we come back from break, we're gonna go over there and hook up a fuel pressure gauge. You don't wanna miss that. We'll be back with more Tech Garage presented by rockauto.com.
Tech Garage, presented by rockauto.com, is brought to you by Magic Creeper, the most versatile creeper ever. Stage 8 Fasteners, home of the world's best locking header bolt. Locking kits now available for all turbo applications. Go to stage8.com. And by rockauto.com, all the parts your car will ever need.
Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by rockauto.com. Now the part we all love, it's all about the diagnostics. Matter of fact, injector diagnosis. The first one we're going to look and we're going to see if it's pulsing. What's pulsing? The computer. We got to make sure a signal is going down to the injector for the injector to open and close. And I got these Noid lights right here at rockauto.com. Low impedance doesn't really take up a lot of electricity. So I'm going to go right here so I don't mess with the computer circuit. I'm going to plug that in. And then what I got is I got Chief Tech Josh in the car, our ASE Master Certified guy. Josh, fire it over. Let's see if we got a pulse. Wow, good, okay. That's good. So you see that thing pulsing? So what does that mean? Well, that means the computer's sending a signal down to the injector. That's about all it means right now. Now I'm going to unplug this one so we can compare it. That was cylinder 3. That was our misfire. This is another cylinder. Now another thing you can do a DVOM test, a voltmeter. Look at ohms of resistance. There's a wire windings in there and it determines if it's going to open or close. So I'm going to come across our number 3, and if you look at the meter right there, you can see we're doing about 12.9, 13 right there. I looked at specs earlier. That's actually right on the money. Come over to the other injector that we know is firing because we don't have a misfire code, and it's exactly the same. Now I got a known good injector here just to make sure. I'll hold that up right here. We'll go across these 2 terminals, and when I go across those 2 terminals, bam, 12.3, 12.4, no problem there. So far we know there's a signal. So far we know that the ohms of resistance is good. So what can we do now? Well, you can do this. You can get an inexpensive stethoscope. I got this at rockauto.com as well. Just put it on, come down, and run the car and listen for them ticking. What are they going to sound like? Well, I can show you right here. I got this tester hooked up, and I can fire it up right here, and you guys can hear it actually ticking. You hear that? Well, what does that tell me? Well, that tells me it's pulsing, that it's pulsing. It's pulsing, but we don't know if it's flowing. Flowing what? Flowing the fuel. So just because it's pulsing, we know we got a signal, we know we got good ohms of resistance, it's time to actually check the fuel pressure. What's going to happen is we're going to bring up fuel pressure. When we bring up fuel pressure, we're going to watch it and it's going to get steady. So go ahead and turn on the key for a second, Josh. I think we already got it up to about 40. There we go. Shut it off. Let it stabilize. Now watch this. I'll go to a known good injector first. So let's go over here to this first one here that we know we don't have a problem, and I'm going to open it. Watch the gauge. Keep your eyes on the gauge. I'm going to pulse it 100 pulses. Here we go. Wow, so that thing went down to about 30. So what that told me is the fuel flowed through it. It went into the cylinder. Now go ahead and set the key again, Josh. Let's see if we can bring it back up to where it was. All right, steady down to 40. Now let's go to our injector, the one that we have a misfire with. I'm going to put it on there, and I'm going to give it 100 pulses. And it dropped, but not as far. It's going down to about 35. So what you want to do is you want to go to each one of them. That tells me that that injector's clogged. Well, if we're splitting the fuel, which probably ours is doing, it's probably wet in there, not atomizing, causing that misfire. And this Infinity actually caught it. The one on the left, boom, flowing good, atomizing, not a problem. So this car's definitely going to need an injector. There's no doubt about it.
Well, I'm glad you said that. We just got this one from Rock Auto, made in the USA, by the way.
Nice.
Yeah, you got it. We're going to put this on. Josh and I will take care of this, and then we reverse the order, put everything back together, we'll button it up, and we'll be done.
I love what you said. Josh and I are going to take care of this.
Well, we're going to go to break, and while we do that, why don't you go get some white gloves?
I'll go get some white gloves. You guys take a short break, but don't go far, because we'll be right back with more Tech Garage presented by rockauto.com. Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by rockauto.com. Well, Donning the lab coat, that can only mean one thing, Garage Ed, that's right. This season, well, you asked for it, you got it. Brake systems from the front to the back. Man, we're gonna talk about everything. We're gonna throw in tech tips, and we're gonna get you out in the driveway and make sure your brake system's in tip-top shape. Where do we start? Well, always at Tech Garage with the fundamentals. Perhaps we just look at a brake system. And of course, we got one laid out right here on a demo board for your view and pleasure. Check this out. It all starts right here at the brake pedal. Now our brake pedal, that's a big fulcrum or a leverage, kind of gives us an advantage, a mechanical advantage, as we go into the brake rod. Now the brake rod's going to push on this or a master cylinder, either or, depending if you have power brakes or you have mechanical brakes. Now the master cylinder, that's the heart of the system. That's the hydraulics. That's what's going to actually multiply pressure and send it down to our wheel brake system. You also have an emergency brake system right here, an emergency handle. And what that does, it mechanically actuates the brakes. So in case you have a hydraulic failure, well, it's not going to be a problem with the emergency brake. Now we get down to the actual wheel brakes. You can have four-wheel discs, or you can have four-wheel drums, or you can have a disc-drum combination. It doesn't make any difference. We're going to talk about them all. This one right here, this is a disc brake setup. It's got a caliper, it's got an actual rotor, and you got some brake pads in there. Over here, you have a drum brake system. A drum brake has a drum on here, you have a wheel cylinder, and some shoes inside of there. We'll break them down later. We have to understand a couple of terms though, and we got to get into brake physics. What's brake physics? Well, how do brakes stop the car? Brakes actually take kinetic energy and turn it into heat energy. Unlike an engine takes the fuel, converts heat energy into kinetic energy, which is moving. All right, so put your hands together, we start rubbing. If you rub harder, what's happening? It's creating heat. The whole job of the brake system is to dissipate that heat. How are we going to do it? Well, a term called coefficient of friction. If I take sandpaper and I try to slide it across the table, man, it's really hard to slide. That's a high coefficient of friction, the two surfaces to be rubbed together. Here's an ice cube right here. If I take that, wow, that thing goes right off. I can slide it right off the table. That's a low coefficient of friction. What do you want in your brake job? You want a high coefficient of friction. How are we going to achieve that? Well, it's all about that heat dissipation, my friends. We got a nice brake pad and a nice rotor. You put that on there. When you apply that pressure, those brake physics, the kinetic energy turns into static motion. It starts to stop. You dissipate heat. This is a high coefficient of friction. Come over here to our rotor assembly here with our worn out pads or no material at all. Man, that's a low coefficient of friction. It's never going to stop. Not to mention the heat dissipation itself. Our rotors here, this is a ginormous heat sink. So if I start to lose some of this meat, I lose the ability to transfer heat. Once I start boiling the brake system, it's ineffective. Not a good thing. This one right here, well, it's thin as can be. You can see it right here. It's not going to hold any heat. It's not going to dissipate heat. You got a major problem if you have a rotor like that. Last but not least, brake dynamics. Now, brake dynamics is pretty cool because you're going down the road. When you stop, it's energy in motion. And remember, it's still wanting to go forward, so that's a lot of energy. As a matter of fact, this blows my mind every time I talk about brakes. Listen to this. A 200 horsepower engine is capable of accelerating from 0 to 60 in 10 seconds. The brake system has to stop the car in 1/5 of the time. That makes your brakes comparable to 1,000 horsepower. You know, that's why we're so glad you chose brakes for our Garage Ed segment. 12 more weeks of brakes broken down into each section, in-depth diagnostic tech tips. So make sure you join us next week when we start talking about rotors. We'll be right back with more Tech Garage brought to you by rockauto.com.
Tech Garage, presented by rockauto.com, is brought to you by Custom Auto Sound, the originator of classic car OEM fit radios since 1977. Alien Technologies, making today's innovations into tomorrow's technologies. And by rockauto.com, all the parts your car will ever need.
Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com. Now, you spoke and we listened, especially when it comes to the tech tips. You know, you blew up our social media every time there was a tech tip out there. So why not incorporate it into the show? Voila, here it is. Master Tech Tips. Hashtag MTTT. Say what? That's right, Master Tech Tips. And why not start with one of the biggest players on the car? That's the oxygen sensor. We'll give you some tips, but first of all, let's understand how it works. The oxygen sensor is located right here. Now, there's a pre and a post oxygen sensor. What does it do? Well, it sniffs oxygen, exactly what it says it does. There's about 21% oxygen in the outside atmosphere, and if your exhaust has 21%, that means you don't have a lot of gas. There's not a lot of pressure there, so guess what? It doesn't make a lot of voltage. Now, on the other hand, your oxygen sensor, well, it may have 21% on the outside, and in your exhaust, you may only have 2 or 3%. That's a rich condition. That means there's a lot of fuel in there. Well, how does it work? Well, your car works on CCC, Command Corrects Condition, and we can actually show it to you right here on Tech Garage in action. Check this out. I got the oxygen sensors running right there, and you can see they use a baseline of 450 millivolts, and down on the bottom end there's about 100 millivolts, and up on the top you have about 900. It's crossing that threshold. Rich, lean. The upper half is rich, the lower half is lean. Command Corrects Condition, switching. The quicker it switches, the better your car runs. Now, the other one over there, that's the actual post-oxygen sensor. That's the one behind the cat, and it's actually doing its job there. You can see it's anywhere from 400 up to about 600, but it's not fluctuating as much as the first one is. Well, that's because the catalytic converter is doing its job. It's working great. Up, down, nice and smooth. The pollutants are coming in, the cat's taking care of it, the rear oxygen sensor is working just great. But you got to remember that Command Corrects Condition. Now, here's your tech tip. Listen, you can kill those things. This RTV, room temperature vulcanizer, that actually will kill an oxygen sensor. So you have to make sure the box says sensor safe. Don't use anything that's not sensor safe. Also, you know, when you dump that coolant down in there, you're doing a big engine job, the heads are off, your exhaust manifold's sitting there, bam, you dump it down in there, coolant will poison an oxygen sensor. So be very careful to keep the coolant out of your engine as well. And speaking of oxygen sensors, I think Josh has one out. You know, this wouldn't be a Master Tech segment without a Master Tech. You are ASE Master Certified. This is Josh Ellis. Josh, what did you find?
This oxygen sensor is rich. How can I tell that? Well, it's nice and black, filled with hydrocarbons.
Yeah, it is. You know what? This one's all sooted up. That's a good indication. Remember I talked about that rich lean condition? This one would probably be slow. Now, you can also look at these conditions right here. You have a few conditions. You have lead poisoning up there on the top. That's going to kill it. Over to the right, you actually have a rich air fuel mixture. That's what's right here on our sensor. It's very, very rich. Bottom left, well, that's coolant. The coolant I said gets in there, that's actually going to poison it. And then on the right, a silicone poisoning, that's actually going to do the damage with the RTV. But you know, it would be really cool, Josh, if we could actually see it in action. How does it work, and can we look at rich lean conditions?
Man, absolutely we can. RockAuto.com sent us an air fuel ratio gauge, and we installed it right here on our favorite demo engine.
And that's really cool because a perfect number is 14.7. That's a stoichiometric number. Right now we're at 18. Well, the engine's not running. That's more air than fuel. That's a lean condition. When I start the engine, well, we're hoping it's going to drop down. We're going to get some exhaust back there. We actually welded into the exhaust up here. It's actually going to read a live condition, which is really cool. There's also some options on there to set some alarms. If it's going really lean, that's dangerous. Our race car drivers know what we're talking about. But when I fire it up, let's see what's going on here. If it goes rich to lean and rich to lean. Now remember, this is live, so we can actually watch it in action. Whew, man, that never gets old.
Sounds great.
I love that engine. But you know, watching that in action, that's really how it works. You can actually watch your car if it's rich or lean. You're driving a turbocharged or a supercharged car. Super important that you're actually monitoring that rich fuel. Great tech tip today. But you know, Rock Auto, they have this, but they have a lot of other cool things too. Accessories you probably wouldn't even think they have. Let's check in with Dave and Tom and see what's going on.
Well, Tom, gauges like that and other accessories are something you guys have a huge variety of at rockauto.com. Where can we find them?
Under individual cars, there'll be an accessory section. And then under the Tools and Universal Parts tab is where we have things like gauges that fit any vehicle.
And what about the gauge John was showing us?
Yeah, that's under interior. And I was just looking, we have air-fuel ratio gauges. We have over 40 of those.
40?
That shows an example of our selection.
It's incredible. And it goes on and on that way. It's just kind of an endless website, I've noticed, when you dig in deep. But very, very cool. Lots of choices.
Yeah, huge number of gauges, and then we have lots of other fun accessories, trailer hitches, things like that. Cool blue coolant hose over there, silicone hose.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. It's a neat piece. And the piece I love, the ones you brought here, the jerry cans in front. They look like regular jerry cans, but they're actually storage cans.
Yeah, they're actually toolboxes or whatever you want to hide in there. So.
Very cool. Yeah, John, rockauto.com has all kinds of accessories, and I know you had a ball shopping for these ones.
Oh yeah, that's how a G35 is supposed to idle. Smooth, man. That thing's really smooth. Great, Josh. All you have to do now is just clear the codes, take it for a test drive, make sure no codes reappear, which I'm sure they're not. Man, you'll be just like new. Speaking of new, we put some new injectors in there, Dave. This thing is nasty. Look at the gunk in there. I mean, you could pick it out of there. It's packed full, Dave.
That is super gross.
Yep. That's made all the difference in the world. And it's a good thing you went and replaced them all. Now, if you saw gunk like that, you probably want to address the fuel filter, the tank, the lines, everything. We'll go back and address it all, but definitely stop the misfire.
You got it. It's a great way to cap off the show right there.
Yeah, you know, it was a great show today as well, man. We talked about Garage Ed. It was all about brake fundamentals, those air-fuel ratios. Man, I love it. Great start.
John, so far this season, we are undefeated.
Undefeated? Well, wait till next week. Yeah. Speaking of next
never
week,
know.
yeah, we're out of time for today. So join us next week for more Tech Garage brought to you by rockauto.com. Man, that's nasty. Great job.
Yeah,
Man,
good
you
stuff.
guys killed it.
Production assistance for Tech Garage is provided by Chipola College, located in Marianna, Florida. Founded in 1947, Chipola was ranked recently as one of the top 3 community colleges in the United States.